Alien girl let the human lead her through flickering lights. What she confessed midway changed him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The flickering lights cast long shadows along the narrow, desolate hallway. The air was thick with the scent of cold metal and dust, and every step Jake Turner took echoed through the dimly lit corridor, amplifying the silence. He adjusted his grip on the flashlight, its weak beam trembling as if unsure of its purpose. He wasn't sure either. He had never been here before, and everything about the place felt foreign, unsettling. Yet, he wasn't about to turn back. Not when he had made a promise. Just ahead of him, the alien girl, Aurelia, moved with a grace that defied the dim environment. Her silver-blue skin shimmered faintly in the dark, her eyes reflecting the scattered light like twin pools of calm water. For someone who had spent her life navigating the unknowns of the universe, it was hard for Jake to imagine how someone so strong could appear so vulnerable. Aurelia glanced back at him, her expression unreadable, her usual stoic demeanor masking whatever emotions lay beneath. "You don't have to lead," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I can manage on my own." Jake stopped walking, his boots clicking against the cold metal floor. He wasn't entirely sure why he'd offered to help her in the first place. There was something about her, something he couldn't shake off. She was an alien, a member of a species as distant from humanity as the stars themselves. Yet, there was a warmth in her gaze, a flicker of trust he had never expected to see. "I know," Jake replied, his voice gentle but firm. "But I want to." For a moment, there was only the sound of their footsteps, a quiet rhythm as they moved forward through the oppressive darkness. It wasn't until they reached the end of the hallway that Aurelia slowed and turned to face him. Her eyes, usually guarded, softened. "Jake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as though the words were something fragile. "I'm not what you think I am." His heart skipped a beat, his breath catching in his throat. The confession hung in the air between them, charged with an intensity that left him speechless. He had no idea what to expect next, but one thing was certain. This moment would change everything. In the flickering light, the truth was finally coming to light. What was once a simple rescue, a simple promise, had now become something much deeper, something far more complicated. And Jake wasn't sure if he was ready for the weight of what came next, but somehow, he knew he couldn't walk away. He looked at her, the woman who had once been an enigma, and felt a connection that transcended everything. Species, cultures, and the vastness of space. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The silence between them stretched for what felt like an eternity, the weight of Aurelia's confession hanging in the air like an unspoken truth. Jake stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. He had been prepared for anything but this, prepared to guide her, protect her, but never prepared to hear her speak so openly about her past. She was a stranger, a mystery from another world. Yet in this moment, she felt closer to him than anyone ever had. Her eyes, usually so guarded, now seemed to lay bare everything she had been holding inside. She took a deep breath, her gaze softening as she continued. "I was not always like this. I was different before I came here. Before all of this," she said, her voice trailing off as if the memories were too painful to put into words. Jake stepped closer, the dim light casting long shadows across their faces. "You don't have to tell me everything, Aurelia," he said softly, his voice steady, but his heart racing. "But if you want to, I'm here." She looked at him, a flicker of hesitation crossing her features before she nodded. I was once a part of something much bigger," she began, her eyes drifting to the floor as if the weight of her past still held her captive. "A place where I mattered, where I had a purpose. But when I failed, when I became too weak, I was discarded, left to wander." The confession was raw, the pain in her words palpable. Jake's heart clenched as he listened. He had never seen her like this, vulnerable, exposed. And for the first time, he realized how much he had underestimated her strength. "You're not weak, Aurelia," he said firmly, reaching out to gently lift her chin. forcing her to meet his gaze. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met." She blinked, taken aback by his words. A small, uncertain smile tugged at the corner of her lips, but it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. "You don't know me," she whispered, almost as if she were trying to convince herself. "I've done things. Terrible things." Jake shook his head, his hand still resting lightly on her shoulder. "We all have a past," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "It doesn't define who we are now." Aurelia was silent for a long moment, her gaze locked on his, searching for something in his eyes. Perhaps she was looking for judgment, but there was none, only understanding. Slowly, she nodded, her expression softening. "I never thought I would find someone who would care," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who would see me as more than just a weapon, a tool." Jake felt his chest tighten, the weight of her words settling over him like a blanket. He had always seen Aurelia as more than that, more than just a soldier or a warrior. She was a person, someone who had been through unimaginable pain, yet still carried herself with a quiet strength. And in that moment, he knew that he would do whatever it took to protect her, to show her that she mattered. "You matter to me," Jake said, his voice low but sincere. "More than you'll ever know." The air between them shifted, charged with an unspoken understanding. Aurelia's eyes softened, her usual guarded nature slipping away as she stepped closer to him. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly trust him. And as the flickering lights above them finally steadied, so too did the uncertainty between them. In that moment, everything changed. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with obstacles and dangers they couldn't yet predict. But one thing was clear. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The days that followed were quieter than Jake had expected. He and Aurelia continued their journey through the narrow, flickering hallways, but there was a new sense of understanding between them. They no longer spoke much about the past. Instead, they shared simple moments, the gentle sound of their footsteps, the quiet hum of the ship's systems, and the occasional smile from Aurelia as they passed through sections of the station that were once alien to her. Jake couldn't help but notice how she had begun to change. She was more open now, more willing to trust him. And even though they still had a long way to go, the bond they had formed felt stronger than anything he had anticipated. One afternoon, as they rested in a small observation room, Aurelia sat by the large window, staring out at the vastness of space. Jake watched her for a moment, curious. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice breaking the silence. Aurelia didn't turn to him immediately, but when she did, her eyes were distant, as if she were gazing into the depths of the stars themselves. "I've never been this far from home," she said softly. "It feels strange, like I'm in between worlds. I don't know where I belong anymore." Jake stepped closer, his gaze softening. He could hear the ache in her words, the uncertainty that had been there all along. "You belong here," he said simply. "Right here with me." For a moment, Aurelia's eyes met his, searching for something, maybe reassurance. Then, a small smile tugged at her lips, though it was faint. "I never thought someone like you would say something like that to someone like me," she whispered. "You make me feel human again." Her words, though quiet, struck a chord deep within Jake. It wasn't that he had done anything extraordinary. He had only listened, supported, and been there when she needed him most. But somehow, that simple connection meant everything. The days passed, and the station continued its silent journey through the stars. Aurelia became more comfortable with Jake, sometimes even seeking his company when the silence of the ship became too much for her. They shared meals, and occasionally, Aurelia would tell him small details about her world, bits of history, stories of her people, but always avoiding the painful parts. Jake didn't push. He knew that in time, when she was ready, she would share more. It wasn't about forcing the past out of her. It was about letting her heal at her own pace. One evening, as they sat in the ship's small lounge, Aurelia turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked, her voice almost hesitant. Jake leaned back in his chair, considering the question. "I used to," he replied after a pause. "But now, I just take things one day at a time. It's less about worrying about what's ahead and more about making sure I'm doing what's right in the moment." Aurelia's eyes softened. "That sounds nice. I wish I could do that." Jake smiled, the warmth in his expression genuine. "You will," he said. "And when you're ready, we'll face whatever comes next together." The room fell silent again, but this time, the quiet wasn't filled with uncertainty. It was filled with hope. Aurelia glanced at him, her gaze steady. "Thank you, Jake. For everything." Jake met her eyes, and in that moment, he knew that no matter where the future took them, this journey would be one worth taking, together. As the days continued, Jake and Aurelia grew closer, their bond strengthening with each passing moment. The ship had become their world, its sterile, humming walls now a familiar refuge from the chaos outside. They spent hours talking, sharing stories about their worlds. Jake about the streets of New York, Aurelia about the distant planet of Aloria, where the skies were always ablaze with two suns. Still, there was always something unspoken between them, a subtle tension that lingered whenever their gazes met, but neither of them acknowledged it directly. One evening, as the stars outside the window flickered like distant flames, Jake found himself sitting beside Aurelia in the small lounge. They had just finished another quiet meal, the plates now cleared away. The only sound was the soft hum of the ship's engines, a constant reminder of their isolation. "Jake," Aurelia began, her voice softer than usual, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said before. About the future." Jake turned to her, sensing the seriousness in her tone. He waited for her to continue. She stared out of the window, her expression unreadable. "I've never really had the chance to think about it," she said slowly. "My whole life has been about surviving, about fulfilling a role. But now, I wonder if there's more." Jake shifted in his seat, his heart racing. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when she might finally open up about her past. But he remained silent, letting her words hang in the air, giving her the space she needed. After a long pause, Aurelia finally turned her gaze to him, her eyes filled with a vulnerability he had never seen before. "I don't know where I belong anymore," she whispered. "I thought I was strong, that I could handle anything. But now, I realize I've been running away from everything, from who I really am." Jake's chest tightened as he reached out, his hand gently brushing hers. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice firm but comforting. "You don't have to run. You can be who you want to be." Aurelia looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt. There was none. He meant every word. Slowly, a small smile appeared on her face, the first genuine one Jake had seen in days. "I don't know what the future holds," she said, her voice more certain now. "But for the first time, I'm not afraid to find out." Jake nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. They didn't need to have all the answers right away. They just needed to keep moving forward, one step at a time. The ship continued its journey through the stars, but in that moment, everything seemed still, peaceful, almost as if the universe itself had paused to allow them a moment of clarity. Jake looked at Aurelia, his heart swelling with something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could build something together. He didn't know what it would look like, but he knew it was worth fighting for. "Whatever happens," Jake said, his voice low but filled with conviction, "we'll face it together. We're in this, Aurelia. All the way." Aurelia's smile widened, and for the first time, she reached out and took his hand. "All the way," she echoed, and Jake knew, deep in his heart, that this was just the beginning of something new, something beautiful. As the days turned into weeks, the dynamic between Jake and Aurelia evolved. They became a team, navigating the challenges of the vast station together, exploring its endless corridors, and learning more about each other with every passing moment. The uncertainty of their situation was always there, lurking in the background, but it no longer felt as overwhelming. They had each other, and that made all the difference. One morning, as they sat down for breakfast in the ship's small mess hall, Aurelia spoke up, her voice quiet but determined. "Jake, I've been thinking about what we've been through and where we're going." Jake looked up from his meal, his gaze steady. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Aurelia took a deep breath, as if choosing her words carefully. "I don't want to keep running from my past. I've spent too long hiding from it, and I think it's time I face it. I want to know who I really am, not just who I was told to be." Jake set down his fork, his heart pounding. He could see the resolve in her eyes, the quiet strength that had always been there, but was now shining brighter than ever. He nodded slowly. "I understand, but you don't have to do it alone." Aurelia smiled, a small, appreciative smile. "I know, and I don't want to. That's why I'm telling you." There was a moment of silence between them, and then Jake spoke again, his voice soft but filled with certainty. Whatever it takes, I'll be here. We'll face it together. The words hung in the air, a promise that both of them knew was more than just a passing statement. They were in this, not just as companions on a journey through space, but as something deeper, something unspoken that had begun to form between them. Later that day, as they ventured to the station's central hub, they encountered a group of alien travelers, their colorful, iridescent skin shimmering in the light. Jake noticed how Aurelia stood a little taller beside him, her posture more confident than he had ever seen before. It was as though she had found a piece of herself, something she had been searching for, and was no longer afraid to let it show. As they walked past the travelers, one of them, a tall, regal-looking alien, paused and glanced at Aurelia, recognition flashing in their eyes. "You are of the Eloria," the alien said, his voice a soft hum. Aurelia stopped in her tracks, her expression unreadable. "I was," she replied quietly, "but I'm not sure what that means anymore." The alien studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You have your own path now. It is not for us to decide who you are, only for you." The words felt like a weight lifting from Aurelia's shoulders. It wasn't an affirmation, but it was enough, a recognition that she no longer had to be defined by her past. She smiled, a real smile this time, one that Jake had never seen before. As they continued walking, Jake couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride for her. This was the woman he had been waiting for, the one who had embraced her past, faced it head-on, and was now moving forward with strength and conviction. Whatever lay ahead, he knew that they would face it together. There was no more running, no more hiding. Aurelia had found herself, and in doing so, she had found something else, a future that was hers to shape, and someone who would be by her side every step of the way. The station's soft hum seemed louder now, as if it recognized the change between them. Jake and Aurelia had grown used to the routine of their new life aboard the ship. The endless corridors, the flickering lights, the vast emptiness of space. None of it felt so isolating anymore. They had become more than just allies in survival. They had become companions, two people bound together by shared experiences and mutual respect. They were no longer just traveling through space, they were building a life, even if it was one uncertain step at a time. One afternoon, they found themselves in the observation deck, staring out at the swirling galaxy beyond. The stars seemed to pulse in rhythm, a silent dance that had always been a backdrop to their journey. But now, for the first time, it felt like a canvas for their own story. Aurelia stood near the window, her fingers tracing the cool glass as she watched the lights of distant stars twinkle in the darkness. Jake stood beside her, silently observing her for a moment before speaking. "Do you ever wonder what's out there?" he asked, his voice low. "What's beyond all of this?" Aurelia didn't look at him, but he could hear the soft sigh she let out. "I used to, but I don't know if I need to wonder anymore." She turned to him, her expression calm, yet thoughtful. "I've spent so much of my life looking for something. Looking for a place, a purpose, a reason to exist outside of what I was meant to be. But now, I think I've found it." Jake met her gaze, his heart swelling with emotion. He knew exactly what she meant. "I think I found it too," he said quietly. "And I'm not letting go." For a moment, neither of them spoke. It wasn't necessary. The silence between them had grown comfortable, filled with meaning. They had both found their place in the universe, not because of what they had lost, but because of what they had found in each other. Later that evening, as they sat together in the lounge, Jake noticed that something had shifted in Aurelia. She seemed lighter, more at peace, as if the weight of the past had finally begun to lift. He could see it in the way she moved, the way her eyes sparkled with a renewed sense of purpose. "You're different," Jake said, his voice quiet but filled with admiration. Aurelia looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You're more yourself. Not just the warrior, not just the survivor, but you. And I think that's the most incredible thing about you." Her expression softened, and for a moment, there was a vulnerability in her eyes that Jake had never seen before. "I didn't think I could be that person again," she said quietly. "But I think, with you, I'm starting to believe I can." Jake reached out, taking her hand in his. It was a simple gesture, but one that meant everything. "You don't have to do it alone. I'm here, and I'll be here every step of the way." Aurelia squeezed his hand, her smile returning, the one that Jake had come to cherish. I know, she said softly. And for the first time in a long time, I believe you. The stars outside continued their quiet dance, the galaxy turning slowly, silently, as Jake and Aurelia sat together, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it side by side. Weeks passed, and with each day, the bond between Jake and Aurelia grew stronger. The silence between them had shifted from a lingering uncertainty to a comfortable companionship. They had become more than just two people surviving in the vast expanse of space. They were partners, working side by side, learning to navigate not only the station but the new lives they were building together. One evening, after another quiet meal, they found themselves on the observation deck again. The stars outside were brighter than usual, the colors of distant galaxies reflecting in the glass. Aurelia stood by the window, her eyes lost in the vastness of the universe. Jake joined her, standing silently for a moment before speaking. What do you see when you look out there? He asked. Aurelia didn't turn to him immediately, but her voice was steady when she answered. I see possibilities. Things I never thought I'd have. A future. A life that isn't defined by what I've been through, but by what I can become. Jake smiled, the warmth in his chest spreading. He had seen this transformation in her, but hearing it from her own lips made it real. He reached out and gently touched her arm. And what do you want that future to look like? He asked softly. Aurelia finally turned to him, meeting his gaze. For the first time, there was no hesitation in her eyes, no walls, no defenses. She was simply Aurelia, and Jake was the one person she could trust completely. I want it to be ours, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I want to build something with you. Something real. Something that lasts. Jake's heart swelled at her words. We already have, he replied, his voice filled with conviction. Whatever happens, we're building it together. And that's all I need. There was a long silence, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of understanding, of two people who had found something rare and precious in the midst of a world that had often seemed cold and unyielding. Aurelia smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made her eyes shine brighter than the stars outside. I never thought I'd find this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was beyond saving, beyond hope. Jake shook his head gently. You were never beyond anything. You just needed the right person to help you see it. They stood there for a while, side by side, staring out at the stars. The universe stretched out before them, vast and endless, but for the first time, it didn't feel so empty. It felt full of potential, full of promise. Jake and Aurelia knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And that was enough. As the ship continued its journey through the stars, they moved forward, not as two separate individuals, but as one, united in purpose, in trust, and in the quiet, unwavering belief that together, they could face anything. As the weeks continued, Jake and Aurelia settled into a rhythm, their lives on the station taking on a sense of normalcy that neither had expected. The challenges they had faced together had only strengthened their bond, and with each passing day, they found new reasons to appreciate the quiet moments. Aurelia, once reserved and guarded, had started to open up more. She shared stories of her planet, Eloria, and Jake had learned about the customs, the beauty, and the struggles of her people. There was something deeply captivating about the way she spoke of her home, and Jake found himself listening intently, always wanting to know more. One evening, as they shared a meal, Aurelia seemed lost in thought. Jake noticed the distant look in her eyes and gently placed his hand on hers. What's on your mind? He asked softly. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. I was just thinking, she began, her voice steady but thoughtful. What happens when we finally reach the next destination? What comes after this? Jake studied her for a moment, understanding the weight behind her question. She wasn't asking about their journey through space. She was asking about the future, about what happened once the uncertain path they were on eventually came to an end. We don't need to have all the answers right now, he said slowly, his hand still resting over hers. What matters is that we keep moving forward. Together. Aurelia smiled, but it was a smile tinged with sadness. I never imagined I would find peace like this, she said quietly. I thought I was too broken to ever feel whole again. Jake's heart swelled with affection for her. You're not broken, Aurelia. You're more whole than you realize. You've been through so much, and you've come out stronger. Don't ever doubt that. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with both gratitude and something deeper, something Jake couldn't quite name. She squeezed his hand in return. You've made me believe that, she whispered. The conversation faded into silence, but it was a comfortable silence. They didn't need to speak anymore. The connection between them said it all. Later that night, as the stars outside the station twinkled like 1,000 promises, Jake and Aurelia sat together in the lounge, watching the endless expanse of space. The vastness no longer felt empty. It felt full of possibility. I don't know what the future holds, Aurelia said softly, her gaze never leaving the window. But I know I want to face it with you. Jake turned to her, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. And I'll be right here, no matter what happens. Together. Aurelia smiled, a real smile, one that spoke of hope and trust. It wasn't just the promise of survival anymore. It was the promise of a future, one where they could both move forward without fear. They had found something rare in each other, a connection forged through hardship, understanding, and care. And whatever came next, they would face it side by side, knowing that together, they could navigate whatever the universe threw their way. In the quiet of the observation room, as the stars shimmered outside, they sat hand in hand, not just two people, but partners in a journey that had only just begun. The days passed slowly, each one melding into the next as Jake and Aurelia grew accustomed to their new life. The journey through the stars felt less like a path of survival and more like a shared adventure, a journey of discovery. They had carved out a space for themselves in the vastness of space, where every small moment became a memory, and every conversation a building block for their future. One morning, after waking from a deep sleep, Jake found himself standing by the window of their small cabin, staring out at the endless cosmos. The stars were particularly bright today, their light stretching across the black void like a blanket of hope. Aurelia walked in, her footsteps soft and sure. She stood beside him, her gaze following his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice gentle. Jake turned to her, a smile tugging at his lips. "I was thinking about how far we've come," he said, his voice full of warmth. "How much we've changed." Aurelia met his gaze, her eyes shining with the same quiet strength that had first drawn him to her. "We have changed, haven't we?" she said, more to herself than to him. "I never imagined I could feel this content." Jake reached out, taking her hand in his. "You've come a long way, Aurelia. You're not the person you were when we first met. And neither am I." She squeezed his hand, her smile growing a little wider. "I think we've both found something we didn't even know we were looking for," she said softly. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, but filled with understanding. They didn't need to speak anymore. Everything was already clear between them. The bond they shared was something unspoken, something that had grown stronger with time. As the days continued, the mission ahead became less about the destination and more about the journey itself. They spent time together in quiet companionship, taking turns at the ship's controls, sharing meals, and exploring the parts of the station they hadn't yet seen. One evening, as they sat side by side, watching the stars drift by, Aurelia turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to have a real home?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake looked at her, surprised by the question. "I think we already do," he said, his voice steady. "Home isn't a place. It's where you're at peace. And with you, I feel at home." Aurelia's eyes softened, and she leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I never thought I could feel at peace again," she admitted. "But with you I do." Jake wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer, the warmth of her presence filling the space between them. In that moment, the rest of the universe faded away. It was just the two of them, together, surrounded by the infinite stars. "We'll face whatever comes next together," he whispered. "I promise you that." Aurelia nodded, her heart full of hope. "Together," she echoed, her voice steady and sure. And in that simple word, they both knew that no matter what the future held, they had each other. The stars would continue to shine, and their journey would unfold, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't matter. They had found their place in the universe, and they would face it side by side.